just got, as you can see, this stack here of sleep studies back that just showed up in the last 48 hours. So these are not all scored yet. We have half of them that are scored that we're going to talk about. If you did, how many in here did an O2 ring? How many did an O2 ring? Okay, so we got a lot of them. Okay, so I'm going to give you some preliminary data on the O2 ring. Also, John Wieringa, who's not here today, but you've seen John before. John's going to be sending you an email. So if you see something from Forge Your Inner Armor or John Wieringa, that's going to be your O2 results specifically for you. So we have a card that has what's going on in the O2 saturation, and then also we sent out that subjective Pittsburgh sleep study, and it'll have a score on that for you, okay? So you'll see that, and then John also has a page and a half of information about why this is important, what is O2, oxygen saturation, why is that so important for us to understand how that works. I think we all know that where do we get most of our energy from? 85% of it comes from oxygen, okay? So yes, we want to be breathing correctly during the day, but very important that we're breathing correctly at night, right? Because do you remember when you're sleeping at night, man, I'm really pushing you guys, I know, but when we sleep at night with the autonomic nervous system, is that a parasympathetic or a sympathetic? Does anybody remember? Rest, digest, and renew is parasympathetic or sympathetic? It's para, like a parachute, very slow, 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 okay? And sleeping is the ultimate parasympathetic response that your nervous system does. If you wouldn't sleep in 14 days, you would die, okay? You have to sleep. Now, what we do is cheat that a little bit here and there, okay? And we think that's okay, but ultimately, it's a bad investment, very bad investment. So if I'm not breathing correctly at night, do you think it's easy for me to slow down? No. So I can't optimize my parasympathetic response. And what happens, actually, right, if I stop breathing, I bring a lion into the bedroom, okay? Because now I'm in sympathetic, and the whole thing tilts, and we need to keep the parasympathetic. So breathing is essential at night. And so some of you, we're going to see everybody, you're going to see you individually, but we're going to see the group scores of the ones we were able to score. And there's definitely some pretty significant concerns. So in some people. So what I want to do, I do want you to remember, okay, this is a informational, a peak performance kind of lecture, but we are measuring a few things that are physiologically very important to you. So if you do have some bad numbers, this is kind of the disclaimer or the little, writing at the bottom. If you see an issue, try to address that. We put some recommendations on there, like talk to your primary. If you're seeing it, you've gone into the red flag zone, okay? Talk to your primary. We're also going to offer a couple informational webinars for people that may have some bad scores that can log in at night, and I can just kind of talk through some different things you can do. A cool thing about this sensor, did anybody have it? I hope the setting wasn't on, but did anybody have it where it vibrated on you at all? You did, okay. So that was actually in training mode, and so I'm sorry that it vibrated on you, but you can set it so it will vibrate if you drop your oxygen saturation. So you remember, we want oxygen saturation to be over 95% all night long. Okay, like right now, if I measured this room, if everybody's alive, yes, you're all alive, you're probably averaging about 97, 98. And if I made you hold your breath to get to 93, you would just feel like you're going to pass out. But you'll see that at night, some of you are getting into the 80s, meaning cells are dying once we get below 95, okay? So that vibration sensor, you can actually use it as a training device that when it drops, it vibrates a little bit, which likely you've gotten in a bad position. If Maybe somebody's told you before that when you're on your back, you tend to snore more maybe, okay, or a particular position. Well, this will pick it up before you start getting so low that you're losing cells. And so that's one way to train that at a more significant level through your PCP, like a CPAP, those kind of things. But if you have some numbers that are off, please take it seriously, because that's not good over time. That affects the heart. That is why most cardiovascular incidents happen in the middle of the night, because somebody's not saturating correctly. But before we get the numbers, this was some questions from last time. So let's go ahead and some questions. I think I often trigger cortisol as I'm laying down trying to go to sleep. Any techniques to stop and try my brain from getting stuck on stressors? So this is one of you, I took the names out, asking this question, so I thought we should answer it. Can somebody give me a really layman term of what cortisol is, just for the room? What do we think cortisol is? It's a hormone, okay? A stress hormone, okay? So if I see the lion, okay, if I see the lion over here, automatically my brain lights up, and that sends a signal from my hypothalamus, pituitary gland, down to my adrenal glands, and I release instantaneously almost, well, within milliseconds, cortisol, and the nervous system goes into sympathetic, okay? And that sympathetic lets me respond quickly to stress. Do I want to be releasing cortisol when I'm lying in bed at night? No, because cortisol, let's see how well you remember from last time, works inversely of what other hormone? Not adrenaline, it is adrenaline. What is the thing that I need to go to sleep at night? Melatonin, good. So if cortisol goes up, what does my melatonin do? Go down. You remember I talked about the NBA players that we work with, that they're playing at 10 o'clock at night, and they're amped up, right? And the cortisol's up, and what happens to their melatonin? Boom. And they can't sleep for 6-7 hours, right? So this person's asking, what do I do, because I think I'm releasing cortisol at night, okay? Well, one of the things that we would work on is your brain's exposure to light does impact cortisol positively in the morning. So blue light in the morning is great because it releases adrenaline appropriately, and I need cortisol in the morning, but I don't want it at night. So one thing I would do, if you feel like this is happening a lot, is I'd wear some blue blocker glasses once the sun sets, because if you're picking up any blue, even these lights have blue in them, it can trigger the cortisol. Very passive thing to do, but very easy to do. What we do at the 49ers, if we're playing an East Coast game, we have computers on all these lights, and we'll take blue out and turn red on based on what the time zone is in Washington if we're playing Washington the end of the week. So we literally reshape the sleep cycle based on the volume of blue that the athletes are exposed to. But on the reverse, you don't want any blue at night. So where else do we get blue from besides lights? Phones, tablets, TVs. So wearing the blue blockers helps with that. And then I'd strongly recommend, there's a great device called a human charger that you can get on Amazon that is these ear lights that you wear during the day in the morning to release more cortisol in the morning so you won't release it at night. And then also any biofeedback mechanisms like breathing and that kind of stuff will help that. How does coffee affect cortisol? That's kind of a trick question, okay? Because a lot of times we drink coffee because we're not making enough cortisol in the morning. Because in the morning, my volume of cortisol should be 4 times that of what it should be during the day, right? Because that's what wakes you up. Why? You ever wonder, why do I come up out of sleep? You come up because as the sun starts its rise, because you're a daytime creature, your body releases cortisol, and that pulls you out of this kind of hibernation state. But what happens when we have burnt that so much and it's gotten out of rhythm is we wake up in the morning and we're like, whoa, where's my cortisol? So instead of grabbing the cortisol, we grab the coffee as a way to stimulate. And what does coffee do? It jams up your adenosine receptors, which is okay, but if it goes too late in the night, then you're not going to release melatonin like you need to. So coffee, in a sense, is a fake version of cortisol. And if you're having to use a lot of coffee, the question should be, why isn't my body making the energy correctly? Okay? You've talked about our breathing while awake to help with coherence. How do we do properly while we're sleeping? Well, we kind of alluded to that with the device that will vibrate. Okay? That will help if you're really having some serious breathing issues, talking to your primary about that. But things like sometimes the jaw devices do work, sometimes the nose strips do work. But what we found, which is very interesting, there's the highest score on O2, and it may just be coincidence, but the highest score on the O2 readings in this entire room is actually somebody who's going through the breathing training right now. He has the highest score. Now, if that was just coincidence, I don't know, but I do think it's interesting. I do know with young athletes that that's the case, like with golf teams that we work with, that the ones who are doing more breathing work during the day, they actually breathe better at night. And then I'd be interested in seeing what the traveling guys are like in sleep. I didn't get a chance to do a study, but racing late, then flying home, and getting back at 11 or 2 a.m. every Sunday night can't be good. Definitely notice all the signs like the basketball guys. Yes. And one of the first things that's going to happen is as this gets out of balance, is you're not going to produce enough deep sleep. Okay? This is what happens in teams that travel a lot, is you don't make enough deep sleep. And you remember that needs to be 25% of your sleep. What hormone do we make that's super important to our functioning all day long do we make when we're in deep sleep? Does anybody remember? It begins with a T. That if you're low on it, your doctor might give you some, and I would say maybe you should fix your sleep pattern. What's that? Testosterone. So many guys, 50s, 60s, get a low testosterone reading, and the doc says, I'll just start taking some testosterone. But no doc is saying, hey, why are you low in testosterone? Well, it's just because I'm 50, 60. No. It's probably because you're not sleeping correctly, because deep sleep is where you make it. What's going to happen to these athletes, what I've seen is 22, 23-year-old athletes in 6 months in the NBA, their testosterone goes from looking like an elite 23-year-old to an old 56-year-old in 6 months. Why? Because you messed with their sleep. Okay? Super important that we work on sleep. Okay, let's go ahead and let's go. Okay, here's everybody's O2 saturation rates. Okay, ideal is, it's actually not funny. Ideal is that we'd all be green, okay? Because what happens when we get below 95% while we're sleeping is cells are dying, okay? So most of these are representative of 2 nights for people. So you'll see a lot of, like the first 2 is 1 person, 3 and 4 is 1 person, okay? 5 and 6. So what you can see here is we have many people who aren't getting enough oxygen at night, okay? And again, I'd like you to explore this further when you get your email if you're in the yellow or red zone. But if I'm yellow or red on there, okay? Let's take this out of here. Okay, if I am red on there, and when I'm sleeping, I'm supposed to be heavy in this, what's going to happen to this thing if all of a sudden I have no oxygen? Which way is it going to tilt? Down, right? And then what am I supposed to be doing during this state? Supposed to be doing this, right? But I'm actually doing the exact opposite if I'm yellow or red. So then I wake up and I say, man, I didn't feel like that did anything for me. Or I'm just going to take 4 hours of it because it sure isn't doing anything. It's because it's not working correctly, because it's tilting the wrong direction because of not having oxygen, okay? So we need to work on that, okay? If you're in the yellow or red zone when we send you an email, again, we'll have recommendations in there of some things to do. There are a variety of there are things, something that can impact this. Alcohol use can impact that at night. There's some other things related to weight that can impact that. A few other things in our handout that we'll send you, it will have those, and it'll give you an option if you want to dialogue more on that. Or if you don't want to dialogue with us, talk to your primary about that, okay? Any questions on O2 as we go into the rest of the discussion for today, which is a new topic? Anything on that? Yes, sir.
You're talking about the young athletes that, or someone in here is in a breathing exercise class, and they're staying well within the O2 levels during their sleep. Do you think that's just like a muscle memory, essentially, from practicing actively thinking about it during the day? It becomes subconscious, and therefore they see the benefits at night?
Yes,
okay.
Because there's a movement we talked about. You remember the thing I showed you where the diaphragm drops?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a learned movement. At first, the first couple weeks, 3 weeks, that person probably would have been just like the rest of you. But now he is not even thinking about it, but in a situation where he doesn't want to, even unconsciously, breathe this way because his body says, ooh, that feels pretty good, right? And so he's turned the conscious into unconscious, and that's why I think if I'd done that O2 reading on this individual 6 weeks ago, it wouldn't have been as good. That's just a hypothesis on that, and we're going to learn that more and more. I think it's caused me to want to say, I'd like to research that more and see, that's interesting. Is that just coincidence that he's the best one in the room? Maybe. But I wonder if all this diaphragmatic muscle memory stuff is actually improving that. Whereas if he'd gone to his doctor and it was down, what's the doctor going to do? Hands down, for every one of those is going to be CPAP. Just CPAP. I'm going to blow air in. You know what? You're way more complex than that. Okay? Your body's amazing. It can learn things, right? And that's what I want us to walk away with and understand. It's not just always one way. And in this next space we're going to go into, I'm going to really push the limits with you guys, okay? We're going to be talking about focus and attention. And this is really an area of significant expertise that I have in and a real passion that I have. So I'm going to start off with a 3-minute video of an NBA athlete. And because this is from 2007, it's going to be very pixelated. And you're going to see this guy in there that sort of looks like me, but he stepped back in time. So you're like, who is that? Is that Doc? Yeah, I went in a time machine. This is the way to do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can pull this up.
Outside the Lines, brought to you by Applebee's.
You guys can hear.
Is good.
Last night against the Mavericks, Chris Kaman of the LA Clippers had 9 points and 13 boards in a heartbreaking loss at the buzzer. Now, the Clips might be struggling, but Kaman continues to have a breakout season. 28 double-doubles in his first 33 games. It's as if it's all suddenly begun clicking in this his 5th season. But as Rick Bucher of ESPN, the magazine, shows us, it may not be Kaman's game, but the head that he brings to it that is making the huge difference.
If you're a parent or a child or somewhere in between, Chris Kaman, and he's even willing to do it if you're on the other side of the country from his bedroom in California.
Obviously, you guys probably know I play in the NBA. This is my 5th year at night.
As it is inspirational.
It's completely changed the way I play basketball.
The physical gifts, soft hands, quick feet, good balance, have always been there for the Michigan native taken 6th in the 2003 draft. But he was 7 feet of coaching frustration.
I would forget a lot of stuff in the timeouts. I mean, my plays, Coach Dunleavy would be all over me. Like, how can you not? I just drew it up right in front of you 5 seconds ago.
So, if you want to know why he's suddenly playing like an all-star for the first time, start at the top. Kaman was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder when he was a child. Last July, he agreed to let a neuropsychologist, Dr. Tim Royer, take a look inside his head and find out exactly why he couldn't concentrate.
Here's somebody who was diagnosed at 2.5 with ADD, put on medicine at 3.5 for ADD, and he doesn't even have it.
It's disappointing that I couldn't have learned about this when I was 5 years old, 7 years old, when I was in school and out of control. The teachers were trying to figure out what was going on.
What you're seeing right now is all the different brainwaves within Chris's brain.
Royer evaluates his patients on the size and strength of those various brain waves. With Kamen, he found a high beta count, meaning there were brain waves running too fast and strong, the opposite of someone with ADD. So Royer created a training program in the same way Kamen's coaches might. Only this one teaches him how to regulate his breathing and heartbeat, allowing his brain to recalibrate itself. When Kamen's brain emits the desired balance of waves, the graphic moves and the music plays.
That was kind of interesting, plus to see how badly you can age in 15 years, 17 years. Let's see. But the takeaway, or what a couple things that jumped out at you, and the rest of the story is at Royer Neuroscience to resources. Watch Chris's story and other people's story. But Chris's, up to this point, I was just doing clinical work in hospitals. And then Chris's case came along, and the rest of his story is he ends up having, all these double-doubles, 28 in the first 33 games, which is pretty amazing. And he makes the NBA All-Star team that year. But that kind of jettisoned the peak performance side of things that we do. But always have been interested and concerned about the ADHD space. But what are a couple things that jump out at you about this person's story? How early he was diagnosed. Did you hear what he said? Anybody know what age? 2.5. I actually have, his mom gave me the IEP from the psychiatrist, and it says 2.5. What kind of crazy world are we living in? They would send him to a special classroom, not regular education, and they'd actually put him in a barrel during the day because his behaviors were out of control. By 3.5, like I have a granddaughter who's almost 2.5, okay? Are you kidding me? And I have 4 kids. They all had ADD when they were 2.5, right? That's part of being a kid, right? But 3.5, they put him on medicine. By 5, he was on triple the dose that a 5-year-old would be on. What kind of craziness, stupidity, pharmacological abuse is that? He would talk about through his life, he felt like he had more that he could do, that he was more creative and more to his personality, but he felt like he was crawling out of his skin all the time, and they would just put more and more medicine in. By the time he was 14, he was going to do exactly what his father did, and he was going to drop out of school, because he spent more time in the hallway than he did anything else. And he was so sick of these medicines. But guess the one person at the school who wouldn't let Chris leave school? His basketball coach, right? Because he was so stinking tall, right? As a 14-year-old. So the basketball coach basically took him under his wing and said, hey, I'm going to keep you in school. They ended up winning 2 state championships. Chris was 7 feet tall, okay? But he was only 196 pounds at 7 feet tall because they had him on so much medicine. Because what does Adderall do? Ritalin? What do you think? We talked about this before with medicines, okay? Medicines aren't that complex. What do you think an amphetamine or a stimulant does to anybody's nervous system in here? Does it make us go this way, or does it make us go that way? That way. What are the side effects of a stimulant? Can't sleep at night. Oh, wait, that's kind of odd, doc, because isn't sleep this? Yeah. Isn't that interesting? You can't take it too late in the day because you started lying and now you can't sleep at night. What else happens? You can't eat. Do you remember where we digest food? Over here. They get anxious, right? Is it all kind of making sense to you? Like, you have to be so careful with these medicines, right? And so he leaves high school, goes to Central Michigan, not a huge powerhouse, but he goes to Central Michigan, and the moment he leaves, he stops taking all of his medicines. And, it's a little looser in college days. So he gets up to 260 pounds and 7 feet tall. And he has fantastic footwork because he had to learn as a big guy how to have good footwork because people would push him around a lot. So with his, they at one point they said next to Bill Walton, Chris Kaman had some of the best footwork ever seen by an NBA center. And they go and play University of Michigan, and he has a triple-double against the University of Michigan his sophomore year, and the NBA starts calling. And they say, hey, you want to go to the NBA? So he drops out of college, and he gets drafted in the draft with, get this, the draft is probably the biggest draft ever. You have LeBron James. Anybody ever heard of him? Carmelo Anthony. You'll hear of him. Chris Bosh. Dwayne Wade. One other guy, and then Chris Kaman. Never even knew that, did you, right? And all of a sudden, he's got all this money. You know what the first thing he did? Was he had somebody build him a $100,000 treehouse. Because he'd never seen any money like that. His dad drove a garbage truck for the city. He'd never seen anything like that. And in the rest of the story, you'll hear about how his ADHD got him into all kind of financial stuff. And how when we fixed his brain, it was like it all settled down a little bit. But it's interesting, I come into the picture and I go to assess him and I say, hey, let's see if we can work. Oh, what happened was his fourth year, they sent him down to summer league. You don't do that your fourth year. That's only for rookies, okay? So he's basically, they're going to get rid of him. Goes to the summer league. The coach calls him in and says, you need to start taking this Adderall. And he just, the 7-foot giant of a man, just starts crying. Like, I can't do that stuff again. Well, you can't stay on the team. Can you believe that they have the power to do that? So that's when he called me and we started working on his brain. And I come to find out the first day, it was so fascinating. I bring all my equipment in, and it isn't like it is now. I bring all my equipment in, and I lay it all out, wires and all kinds of stuff. And I hook him up, and I assess his brain. And then the next day I came back, and I laid everything out, and I got a phone call, and I had to leave. So I left. I took the phone call. I came back. He had plugged in everything on the desk, hooked himself up, and had the software running, reading his own EEG. I'm like, how did you do that? Well, I saw you do it yesterday. I'm like, what? I said, Chris, has anybody ever assessed your IQ? No, I am stupid, Doc. Why are you stupid? Well, my teacher said I was stupid. I had to be in a barrel when I was a little kid. And I'm listening to all the things this guy knows. And I'm like, you got to let me do IQ testing. So I also do neuropsych IQ testing. I assess him 2 days later. He has 160 IQ. He's Mensa. This guy is Mensa, and they're putting him in barrels. What? There was never, I can tell you because I know statistically, there was never a teacher that taught him that was even close to his IQ. But we got it mixed up, didn't we? We looked at behaviors, we didn't look at the brain. Does that make sense? And so as I looked at Chris's brain, guess what happened? I thought, because in true ADHD, I'm really getting slightly sidetracked with this story, but I hope you're enjoying it. It's kind of a great story. It's symbolic of what's going on in our culture, okay? Because it isn't just ADHD. This happens in depression and anxiety and blood pressure medicines and everything, where we just get so hung up on the behavior and we don't think about, well, what's going on in the nervous system? What you guys are learning about the nervous system right now, your physician doesn't know, okay? And if you have a kid that you're taking in to get diagnosed with ADHD, they don't know about how to look at this stuff. They're just going to look at behaviors. So what happens truly in ADHD is when you look at the brain, in true ADHD, it has this going on, okay? Is it can't get in gear. And so it's like the person is always in a startle effect. Have you ever had a startle effect where you're kind of checked out and then you're like, oh shoot, where am I? You ever have that happen? You know, where you're like zoned out and then you're like, how do I get reoriented? That's what happens in an ADHD brain, is it checks out and then it has to get reoriented, and it kind of touches everything and kind of gets impulsive. But it starts upstream neurologically with it being like this. It's too slow. And so what does the amphetamine do? Speeds it up. And that's a true case of ADHD. My experience with close to 80,000 brains, that's only happening in about 20% of people that truly get diagnosed with ADHD. The other 80% are misdiagnosed. So with Chris, I expected to see this, right? This guy's the poster child for ADHD. I mean, it should be like this. When I hooked up his brain, guess what I saw? This. It was going too fast. It was too anxious. So what do you think happens when you put on 3 times the dose of Adderall to this brain? You know what that's like? That's like having 10 cups of espresso on your most stressed day. Just like this. No wonder he felt like he was crawling out of his skin. Right? I mean, that's just awful to think about that. And so when I hooked him up, I said, wow, this is interesting. I said, Chris, tell me why you think, and this might be the most unusual answer I've ever heard. I said, tell me why you think you have ADHD. And I ask people that a lot, but I've never gotten this answer. He said, well, when I'm up against Shaq, okay, that's kind of like who says that, and I can feel Shaq's skin next to my skin, and any other big guy where I can feel his skin, it makes me feel kind of weird and like I want to get away from it because it just doesn't feel right. And he goes, and my worst game ever at Madison Square Garden, they changed the color of the front row seat. It was the third one over. They changed the color of it. And all game, that's all I could think about. Is that ADHD, guys? No. This guy has OCD to the max. I said, what's your free throw percentage? Anybody who knows basketball, a 7-foot center shouldn't be that good. And his free throw percentage is about 85%. That's pretty good, right? When we talk about Shaq, you remember that, right? So I'm like, Chris, there's something different going on here. This isn't that. So we started working on his high beta, his stress, and guess what started to happen to his attention? It started getting better. It started changing. Okay, things were different. So let's talk a little bit about knowing the difference between going upstream and downstream, and I'm going to give you a few different things about true attention disorders. So I'm going to give you a few numbers. How many people were born here in the 80s? Anybody born in the 80s? 70s? Anybody in the 90s? A 90. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, and anybody before, we won't say anything before the 70s because that's where I am. I'm some down in there. Okay, yeah, here we go. Okay. But I want to give you in the 1980, in the United States of America, USA, I just want you to put your thinking cap on and just think reasonably about this, okay? In the 80s to 90s, 3% of people were diagnosed with ADHD. 3% attention disorders, okay? 90, so this was actually, so 3 out of 100, okay? Then 90 to 2000s, okay? That number went up to, this was 3 out of 100, okay? And then this number went to 7%. So it doubled, okay, in 10 years, okay? By 2010, this is people with ADHD, okay? By 2010, this number went up to 10%, okay? Now, the number's at 13%. Isn't that interesting, isn't it? Right? What would you call something like that? That goes from 3% to 13% of the population in the United States. What would we call that if that was some other disease? Huh? Like, what's in the water? Like, that's an epidemic. 3 to 13%. Isn't that interesting? Okay? So currently in the United States, it's 3%. Guess how many people in Europe, what percentage of population have ADHD in Europe? 3%. Now, today, in France, 3%. Man, that's weird, right? 13% here, we grew from this number, which sounds kind of interesting, to this number in Europe. How about Japan? I'm actually going to Japan on Sunday. My son is in the military, and I'm going to go see him. It's going to be really fun, okay, in Japan. Guess how many people in Japan have ADHD? Kids. 1%. Any thoughts? Does that, I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but that sounds a little weird, okay? What are your thoughts or hypothesis on that? Some people would say, well, we're better at doing diagnosing than any place in the world. That's the argument here, is that we're better at diagnosing than any place in the world. What, do you have any thoughts on that? Food? Could be nutrition. Do you think that maybe pharmaceutical company is where I would go, okay? But do you think that maybe we're not truly understanding how to diagnose correctly? Like Chris's story is a perfect example of poor diagnosis because all we did was look at behaviors. So I'm a neuropsychologist, right? And any of your physicians could send their patients to me, and I could make an ADHD diagnosis. I'm licensed in North Carolina, in Michigan, in Virginia, and then I have a tele-license throughout the United States. So I can make a diagnosis of ADHD, and I would for a physician. And how do you think I'm going to make that diagnosis if I didn't do this work? The average run-of-the-mill neuropsychologist, how do I make that diagnosis? Anybody know? Questions. So let me give you a few of them, okay? And this is how we make the diagnosis. This is what I went and spent a lot of money to go to school to learn to do, okay? This is what we say. Does it seem like he doesn't listen? No, I'm serious. That's one of the criteria. And has he done this for more than a few months? How about this? It's difficult for him to sustain attention. What the heck does that even mean? What is sustained attention? Okay? So we check those two. All we have to do is get 3 more and we're there. Okay? Avoids tasks that require effort. I think that's probably most of us in this room. No, I'm joking. But no, right? I mean, do you hear what I'm saying? Like, this, I'm going to make a neurological, guys, this is bad. I'm going to make a neurological decision about this child based on these questions. Easily distracted. And then here's my favorite. That's just all-time favorite. You're not going to believe this is in the manual for diagnosing. Acts as if driven by a motor. Did you hear what I just said? Like, I had to learn that. I had to take an exam about what are the questions you ask, and one of them is, he acts as if he's driven by a motor. What the heck does that mean? And is there something wrong with that? Those are all downstream behaviors that the average time it takes is about 10 minutes to make a lifetime diagnosis on a disorder that's going to significantly alter my nervous system and my child's nervous system because all I did was look at behaviors. And we need to look beyond that. Jake's going to hook somebody up here, and we're going to look at their brain. Can I have a volunteer to look at your brain? Yes, right here. You're going to sit right here. Jake's going to hook you up. I want to give you a couple other numbers, okay? It's kind of fascinating. So let's take, I'm not an artist, so as you've probably figured out, wow, this is bad. Does anybody have any idea what that is? That's United. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This is the United States of America, okay? What our founding fathers explored and discovered. Okay, so in America, get this, if you live in the state, I don't even know how it's shaped. Is it like this? Shaped in the state of Louisiana. If you live in the state of Louisiana, you have an 18% chance that you will get diagnosed with ADHD. If you live in the state of California, you have a 6% chance. I'm not a mathematician, but this sounds kind of weird to me, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. Get this. Let's make it even weirder, okay? If you're in this group of states and you're a boy and you're African American, you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting diagnosed with ADHD. That sounds like a socioeconomic decision than it does sound like something that is not based on neurology. Because you know what happens? It's down here in these states, there's not a lot of resources. There's not a lot of, over here, we have a lot of psychiatric resources and a lot of different things that we can offer people. But here in groups that don't have a lot of finances and that have to go through the system, they don't get a lot of care taken on their mental health. And what happens, and then the pipeline for this into the prison system is huge because nobody's dealing with the main issue here, okay? And again, what is it in Japan? 1%. Here, we're talking about 33%. There's something wrong. Nobody's telling you this stuff, okay? But this is why I cringe, and I know we just kind of do it socially. Oh, I've got ADHD. No, you don't. You sleep like crap, okay? You're putting garbage in your body. You're not exercising. You're not taking care of things. You're not dealing with anxiety, okay? And you want to call it ADHD. That's not what's going on, okay? So if I take 100 people, and I've studied this over and over and over again, that have been diagnosed with ADHD, there's only 20 that will really have it. A third of them, and it's interesting, we just talked about this, 33 of them will have a sleep problem. And this is in kids too, is they're not sleeping correctly. What is my attention going to be like if I'm not getting enough sleep? Like all those reds and yellows, and during the day you're trying to pay attention, or you're falling asleep while I'm talking to you. Well, maybe I need to get a little bit more exciting. I don't know. But could it be that what you think is an attention issue is really a sleep issue? Okay? And then there's another 33% of this group, or 33 of this group, that it's actually anxiety, stress. But they perceive it as this. And what's the worst thing I want to give somebody with anxiety and stress? A stimulant. What's the worst thing I want to give somebody with a sleep problem? A stimulant. So get this. This has been analyzed. Man, I'm running out of time. I love this topic, as you can tell, so we are going to piggyback to next time. But I got to hit this before we get into looking at brainwaves, because this is where the ultimate answer is, upstream in the brain. But I got to hit this, okay? The accuracy, this has been measured, of an ADHD. Does anybody have a coin on them? Like does anybody carry any money? Like a penny or a quarter? We're going to imagine, okay? Imagine that I have a coin here. I'm going to flip it. If you take the average primary care physician who's not trained in this but can make the diagnosis on this, the average of their accuracy of the diagnosis, that's a trained physician, flip the coin, 50%. What happens if your kid or you are one of the other 50%? That's not good, right? The accuracy of our medical system at getting this diagnosis right is 50%. That's concerning, right? I talked to some people in Europe and they're like, it takes a year to get the diagnosis for ADHD in our country because we're very particular about who actually makes the diagnosis. Here, we're just flipping coins. So we're not going to have time to do the EEG, but we're going to do it next time. And I want to explain what happened. So in 2012, you didn't see this on the front page of the newspaper, okay, or on the internet. But in 2012, the FDA said, hey, If you use an EEG to measure the brain for the diagnosis, and you pick up this, which is called the theta ratio. You guys have heard me talk about that before. Next time we're going to talk more in depth about that. But if the theta ratio is over 3, and you see that on the EEG, it will improve the diagnostic accuracy by 40%. So now we're up in the 90s because we're looking at the brain. And the only reason we're not doing that is people are just too lazy to do it. And we want to just get the meds moving through the system, okay? But we need to stop and think about what's going on. So next time, you're going to be here next time, right? What's your name?
Nate.
Nate. Nate, we're going to look at his brain, and we're going to look at all the electrical current in his brain, and we're going to see how much theta is in his brain. And I'm going to quiz you on this. 2.7 is ideal. Anything greater than 3 means his brain's going too slow. There's too much parasympathetic. If it's less than 2, there's not enough slowing, not enough sleep in the brain. So we're going to actually look at that number in his brain next time we meet. And then we're also going to look at, does anybody remember? You're going to have to really think through this. In the video, they said that Dr. Royer said that Chris had a high something count. Huh? Beta. It was the high beta. That was the stress brainwaves. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to see what his stress brainwaves are. And we're going to see how those impact downstream behaviors, okay? I have no question that people will have attention issues and that kids have attention issues. I don't want you to take away, Doc doesn't believe in ADHD. I don't believe in poor diagnostics and that you are worth way more than just a checklist, okay? Whether that's for your sleep, whether it's for your blood pressure, whether it's for your anxiety, whether it's for your low testosterone, whether it's for your depression. You're way more than a checklist. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. And we want to look at it. And next time, we're going to look upstream so that we can be very accurate about what it is that we want to address. Oh, QR code. Oh, my goodness. Can you believe I almost forgot the QR code? And we're going to, even though, Jake, where am I? Here, right? Okay, guys. While I'm pulling up the QR code, any questions as we finish up? Yeah, what's your name?
John.
John. Okay, John, what's your question?
The diagnostic criteria, was that the same as it was in the 80s?
Ah.
Or, that's one question, then the other question is that the same across countries?
Very good question. Okay, so get this. The original, and I think it's funny, the original guy who came up with the diagnosis of ADHD was called something like brain disorder of early childhood. You know, we got rid of that name because that's not going to work very well. His name, he was in the early 1900s, like 1904, and his name was Dr. Still, which I think is kind of funny, okay? We still use some of the exact same criteria that Dr. Still came up in the early 1900s that we use today, and that's worked its way through what's called the DSM, and we're now in the DSM-5, okay? But it's basically the same criteria. Think of any other form of medicine. What have we done since 1905? When your heart, what have we learned about your heart? What have we learned about your brain? What have we learned about your body, your hormones? And we're still doing the same thing as 1905? Hey, I want a different way, right? We got to do a different way. Unfortunately, there's more things at play that want to feed into let's make the easy diagnosis. Let's take one more question. Any other questions? Did anybody find any of those numbers kind of interesting, right? Nobody's talking about that. And in this book, you're going to find a lot more about that, okay? And it's going to talk about, towards the end, 3 chapters from the end, it's going to talk about how do you really diagnose this thing, because we can do it accurately. We just got to take the time to do it, okay? Oh, one last thing I want to say is I'm doing a lecture tonight at the Peninsula Club. At the Peninsula Club at 7 o'clock. Anybody's invited. So if you have family members, if you have, somebody that you're concerned about or want to know more about the brain, we're going to be doing this at 7 o'clock, and it's free. And you'll probably have another book that I'll give away there. Golly, you guys have a whole library of Dr. Royer books. One last question.
What are you focusing on at the Peninsula Club?
Tonight, we're going to be focusing on the autonomic nervous system, and we're going to be unpacking some brain waves a little bit more. So we're going to be really trying to show some of the things that we might be looking at next time, okay? But you guys are getting like unpacking of a lot of stuff in detail, okay? Next time, I'm also going to want to, we're going to have one last time that we're going to have an open-ended topic. So think about between now and next time, I'm going to ask you, what do you want the last topic to be about? We're going to finish up on attention, this time a focus, and then we're going to start on processing speed for our last lecture of the series, and then I'm going to have one last lecture, which will be whatever you guys want it to be. If I don't know anything about it, then I won't talk about it, but let's see. Don't ask me about cars or the history of NASCAR, because I cannot talk about that, okay? You guys, thanks for listening. I know we went through a lot. Watch the rest of Chris's story. It's kind of fun, okay? You guys have a great one.